Thank you all for taking an interest in my book. I'd like to tell you a little more about my background, a little more detail for a few minutes, and then we can look at some of the pictures in the book, and then I can answer questions, hopefully, and maybe sign your book if you'd like me to do that. You know, it says 1980 to 2000, but I'd like to go back to 1961, when I was 17 years old, going on 18, and I was in high school in Minnesota. I was, as you said, I was from Nebraska, but I was going to high school in Minnesota, and I had to make a decision whether to go to college or not. And I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to be a photographer. And an uncle of mine who worked in New York got me a job offer at the Daily News as a copy boy. But it was a big decision, of course. And at the same time, one of the teachers in this high school told me that he worked with Alfred Eisenstadt in Berlin before the Second World War. And he wrote a letter to Eisenstadt at Life magazine, asking if he would see me. So make a long story short, I showed up at Life magazine with a few photographs, and Alfred Eisenstadt talked to me about 5 minutes. And he said, "What can I do for you?" And I told him the problem. And he said, "If you don't take the job at the Daily News, you're a fool." So, as they say today, it was a no-brainer. So within 2 months, I was at the Daily News, working at 6 o'clock at night till 2 in the morning, $53 a week, $35 take-home pay. But it was a wild thing. It was a wild place. I mean, it was just before computers, before electric typewriters. They had 50 photographers there. Most of them had big camera bags, this big thick leather. But they didn't put the camera in the camera bag. They put flash bulbs in there, all loose, like 35 flash bulbs this big. So they could pick them out fast and put them in the camera, take a picture. And a couple little stories about that time, kind of interesting. Within about 2 weeks, somebody came up to me and said, "We want you to go up to Yankee Stadium, get the film from the photographer." I said, "Where's Yankee Stadium?" I didn't know him from nothing. I was from Minnesota, you know. So they told me how to get up there, and I went up there, went in the press box, press entrance. They said, "Go down to the first balcony between home plate and first base." I went up there, said, "Go down to the first row." I climbed down a ladder, and hanging beneath the balcony was a platform with all the photographers. And at that time, there were 7 newspapers in New York City. And the Daily News photographer had a lens really this long and this big around, this huge, giant thing. And he didn't focus it by turning the lens. He focused it by moving a lever. And he had the side of the lens marked for home plate, first base, second base, the whole thing. So this guy knew baseball, of course, very, very well. And he knew what was going to happen before it happened. And he would pre-focus the lens on second base, for example. He'd swing the camera over, and if he was lucky, he took a great picture. And the next morning on the back of the New York Daily News was this incredible, super sharp photograph. Because he was using 4x5 film, 4 inches by 5 inches. And the other little thing that happened there, that one night around 10 o'clock at night, this very poorly dressed man came in. And his clothes were hanging off him. He hadn't shaved in a long time. His hair was a mess, the whole thing. And he was talking to the picture editor. And he was like begging the picture editor to take these little 8x10 photographs to buy them. And he was having a hard time. And I said to somebody in the know there, I said, "Who is that guy over there? Like, why did they let him in the building?" "Oh, they call him Ouija." So that was pretty incredible. So then I stayed there a year, and then I worked for a fashion photographer as an assistant. And he had a connection with a small film company. And at the same time, I saw a documentary film by D.A. Pennebaker called Primary, which was 1960, I think it was, Primary of JFK. This is a documentary like no one had ever done before. It was incredible. It was all handheld, available light. It was just an incredible document. And so I got interested, and of course, you think that being in motion pictures is very glamorous, and being a cameraman is even more glamorous. Well, anyway, so I got into that field, and because of this fashion photographer, I started working at a small film company. They were doing TV commercials. I watched them work. I watched the cameramen work. I started to learn how to use a motion picture camera. Sometimes when they had to reshoot things outside, they told me to reshoot it. And I worked as an assistant to the film editor. Then I was going to be drafted. This is before Vietnam. Nobody heard of Vietnam. And you never volunteer in the Army. It's a big mistake. But I knew that, but I figured I wanted to have them guarantee I was going to be a cameraman. So by volunteering, going to 42nd Street, Times Square to sign up, I figured I ought to go there. Why not, you know? So I signed up there, and they guaranteed me to be a cameraman, and they were true to their promise. And for 2 out of 3 years, I was stationed in Long Island City at Paramount Pictures, which used to be Paramount Pictures, the largest film studio outside of Hollywood. It's where D.W. Griffith worked, and Rudolph Valentino. It's an incredible place. And it's still there. It's still being used. But it was still the Army. At 6 o'clock in the morning, you were out in the parking lot saluting the flag and picking up cigarette butts. But at 8 o'clock in the morning, you walked in there, it was like Hollywood. It was an incredible thing. Unbelievable. They had actors from New York acting in these training films, and civilian cameramen doing all the work, and I worked for them. So I did that, and then I got out of the Army and joined the Cameraman's Union in New York and was an assistant cameraman for 5 years. I was very lucky to work with some very good cameramen, and I learned a lot about lighting, because photography is all about lighting. And these guys were very, very good at lighting interiors and solving problems. And I did that for 5 years and 10 years as a cameraman. And like you said, I worked on the film with Nancy Graves in Morocco, which was a whole story in itself. And but after 10 years as a cameraman, for various reasons, I got kind of tired of it. The glamour kind of faded away. It was a very high-pressure job. People always walking up to you and say, how long is it going to be till you get this thing lit? You know, everything was on hyper-tense thing. And so I said to myself, you know, I know how to, because of all my training, I know how to do lighting. I could be an architectural photographer, because architectural photography is like 25% exteriors and 75% interiors. And every interior has to be lit in some way, a lot, a little, whatever. So I started to try to get jobs as an architectural photographer, and it was a slow process, but I was my own boss. And at the same time, I got this, new buildings were going up in Manhattan, particularly along 6th Avenue, and to me they were a big bore. They all looked the same, all boxes. And but I realized that down here in the Wall Street area, every building was a special building. Every building had an artist doing, you know, all kinds of things on the building, crazy things halfway up the building that people couldn't see from the sidewalk, all these weird things on each one of these buildings. And it was a fascinating thing. And so in my spare time, I started taking pictures of the buildings around Wall Street. But I was very, very lucky. A lot of people helped me, a lot of organizations. But what I was really lucky about was that, unbeknownst to me, at the same moment that I decided to do this little project for myself, they were renovating the Woolworth building. They were fixing the terracotta. And the on-site architect let me roam around the Woolworth building. This is unheard of. This is, you know, who can do that? Who can just walk around the different floors of the Woolworth building without being watched, you know? And the other thing that happened was the Whitney Museum started a very small gallery, an annex, their first annex, at the end of Wall Street and the East River. And in order to publicize the gallery, they had tours for the public. So I went on the tours, but I wasn't interested in the tour. I was interested in taking my own picture. And of course, the tour guide didn't appreciate that at all. But, you know, I mean, you have to take every opportunity you can for something like this, because the permissions were not forthcoming. You had to really steal them. And so I had to work very, very quickly when I was on these tours. And because when the tour guide said, okay, we're going, well, I had to leave. I couldn't stay there. So that's my background in a nutshell. This is the camera that took 95% of the pictures in the book. And it's a copy of an American camera called a Deardorff. This is made in Japan. But the reason why I picked this camera is a number of reasons. It folds down to a little box. I put it in a backpack so I could come down here in the subway. The film is as big as this piece of glass, 4 by 5 inches. So you got incredible quality. And the other thing is that when you're photographing a building with a regular camera, shall I say, and you're looking up just a little bit, tilt the camera just a slight bit, the lines of the building will go like that. But with this camera, you can keep the lines straight. That was very important to me to try to do that. So I started this project, and I realized that down here it was a total chaos, habitually, just a mess. All these buildings compressed together, things coming from all different points of view, and I wanted to make it very, very simple photographs, very graphic photographs, very simple. I want to cut out all the distraction. So that's why I didn't show any cars, I didn't show any people. Sometimes I had to cut off the sidewalk. I didn't want any signs. I want to make it very, very simple. So I think I've reached. I think that's it. Let me just check. We want to look at the pictures in the book, but let me just see if I've covered everything here. Oh, one little important thing. The prints, the photographs in the book were made from scans of silver gelatin prints that I made myself in what I call in the book my darkroom. But in fact, it wasn't my darkroom, it was my kitchen in my West 93rd Street apartment. And my kitchen was a dump. It was a very small place. And it was a real pain in the neck to take everything out of it, put the darkroom stuff in, all the trays, all the chemicals, and then clean the whole mess up after it was done. And I did this for years and years and years. You know, somebody like Ansel Adams had his own room, his own building outside his house, where you just walk in and start doing his thing, you know. But for me, I didn't like being in a dark room. Some people like it. But for me, it was very unpleasant. But it's something I had to do because I learned if you want a picture to look the way you want it, you got to do it yourself. You can tell somebody, and if he's really good, he'll come close, but he won't do it exactly. You know, it's all a very personal thing. Making something a little darker, a little lighter. And each one of these photographs had to be shaded a little here, lightened a little there. Not a lot, but just to make them look really good, you know. So that's that part of it. We can take a look at some of the pictures. I'm not going to talk about all these pictures, but I'll talk about some of the more interesting ones. This picture was taken from the observation floor of the World Trade Center. And I was photographed through a very dirty window. And there's a trick. You put the lens right up to the dirty window so it's touching the glass. and you're focusing on infinity. So the dirt becomes out of focus, and you don't see it if you're lucky. So that's how I took down. We can go to the next photograph. Okay, hold it. What interested me, among other things, was here you have all these skyscrapers that are very famous from a distance on the tops of the buildings, but then you have some little tiny doors that nobody thinks about. They walk by, nobody thinks about them, and they're all at the bottom of the skyscraper. There's doors that aren't being used anymore, but somebody designed them, somebody made them, and they're really crazy little things, and I was able to find some of them. The light on the right side of the picture is from sunlight bouncing off windows behind me, and that was really nice, a real nice effect that was a lucky thing. Okay. Keep going to the next. This is Paul Goldberger's very good introduction. This one I took early in the morning in the summer. So the sun is coming up over the East River on the right, and it's making the shadow of the eagle fall on 16 Wall. Okay. Keep going. Keep going. This one on the left, that's an example of me being on the Whitney Museum tour. They were on the top of One Wall Street, which is an incredible room with a huge fireplace. It looks like a scene from Citizen Kane. But I looked out the window and here's this picture. So I had to set up, the camera has to be on a tripod. And another thing I forgot to say is, when you look through the camera, you have to look through this, you have to put this cloth over your head like this, so you see through the camera. So all this, it takes a long time to set the camera up and fool around with it. Anyway, I had to do this quickly because I was in the tour. I wasn't supposed to be doing this. Okay, next. Keep going. Now here's another door. This is a side door on one wall, which I found very interesting, this detail. Nobody uses, I don't think anybody uses that anymore. Okay. Now the picture on the left, I was on top of the JP Morgan Bank Building 23 Wall, and the picture on the right, I was on a very rare place. I was on top of Federal Hall, on the roof of Federal Hall, which I don't think hardly anybody's allowed to get onto. Okay. There's Federal Hall. So I was up above on the top there. Okay. 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 That's how the Customs House. This is before Photoshop. None of this stuff was Photoshopped to death. And here we had a situation where it was Sunday morning, like 8 o'clock in the morning, and there's somebody always walking around in New York City, and when you want to take a picture, they will stop and they'll look at a pigeon, they'll do, always, it never fails. But to complicate matters, cars were going around these turns, so I had to time the cars with no traffic and no people looking at pigeons, the whole thing. So I got this picture. Okay. This is very, very old. This is the oldest building, I think, in New York City. It's very old. Okay. Okay. This is right down the street here, and it's all covered up. The Citibank, they covered up the sign, first class door. That's where passengers on the Canard line would go. They would enter there. Okay. Now this one, the horse, the problem, the photographic problem with the horse was, how do I separate the horse from the background? How do I make it stand out? Because if you don't do it right, it'll just be a merge and everything else. So the first thing was to get the camera so that the horse's leg would be silhouetted against the dark side of that modern building. And just give it a little hint of black along the side of the leg. Then, and we're talking about moving a few inches left or right to get this to work. Then you have to get the camera the right height to get the horse in that spot, in the sky. So it's not the face, the head isn't, the mouth of the horse is not touching the buildings. Now this sea nymph is, you can see her leg on the other view on the left, a little tiny bit of it. It's hard to see, but anyway, this sea nymph is a side view of the one on the picture on the left. And I really like this because if you were working on a film, a big budget film doing this, you would put up a light just to light the face, and that's what the sun did. I was really lucky. But to get these pictures, I had to climb through a little on this setback. And these horses, you can go over to the customs house and look up, and you can see them, parts of them. But that's why did somebody go to all this trouble? There's 4 of these up there. Why did they go so much trouble? You can't even see them hardly from the street. You know, who knows? Anyway, okay. Now this one, a couple, 3 pictures of the Standard Oil building. I understand that at one time there was a flame on top of this building, burning oil. Right? But I did this in a couple of pictures in the book. I would offset the photograph and show a very simple building over here in the background to show how different they are. Okay. Here are 2 more pictures of the same building, different angles. This building is turned on its base. Very strange thing. Okay. All right. Now this one, this door, I had to do this around noon, and people were, of course, out on their lunch hour. So I had a couple things I had to work on here. I had to make sure there weren't any people in the pictures. I had to time it so that people had left the frame. And I also wanted the door to be in some interesting position. I didn't want somebody coming in or out of the door. And I waited and waited till the door finally got in this position. And I love the fact the light hit this thing here to accent that. But that was, a lot of this kind of stuff is waiting and waiting. You could wait, 2 or 3 hours for something to happen. Okay. Now this one has a little story to it. I wanted to get a side view of the Woolworth building, and I found out that the building next to it, just south of the Woolworth building, there was a balcony, and it was level with this area of the Woolworth building. So I counted the floors, and I went up to that floor. I learned you always went with your camera. You didn't go and say, "Can I come back?" Because forget it. They wanted, they would have the patience to deal with me at the time, but that was all I had. And I went up there and I explained my problem to the secretary at the desk of this company. I don't know what they did. And she said, "Oh, Mr. So-and-so, he's out to lunch. You can go in his office. His Big Shot's office, huge office." And there's the glass door. Open the glass door, step out on the balcony. And there I am, looking at this thing. And this, pretty incredible view of this. Okay. Now this is part of the side of that picture we just saw. You can see this part of it. It's just a facade, but you can see on these pictures how the terracotta was put on with strapping, and they were repairing it at the time I took these pictures. That's on the 43rd floor. I got up there on the 43rd floor. Okay. Now this one I was really lucky about because they had this is part of the huge entrance to the Woolworth building, huge doorway. It must be 4 or 5 stories tall, but they had a scaffold up there. They were working on it. And so I was allowed to get up on the scaffold and get this picture. Otherwise, forget it. I would never have gotten this picture. And that also looked. Those figures were going all around the whole entrance of the building. Okay. Okay. Now this is 195 Broadway. A while back, I don't know if you noticed, but I had a close-up of this corner with these things, for like 10 pictures back. they had a figure, a huge statue on top of this pyramid, and they took it down. AT&T moved to Madison Avenue, and they put it in a tiny little lobby, this huge thing in this tiny little lobby, and replaced it with this ball. So, okay. Now here we have, on the left, kind of interesting thing. Let's see if I can get these things right here. This is view from Park Place. And what you have is 15 Park Row. That's the curved building on the left. That was built in 1899. In St. Paul's Chapel, 1766. And 195 Broadway, where the ball was. You can see that in the background there. And that was 1924 in the World Trade Center in 1973. Okay. Here's 15 Park Row, 2 pictures of it. Okay. This picture I got because my wife was on the way to jury duty. That's the courthouse over there. And she saw this building. This is really not in Wall Street. This is quite a ways uptown. But I took it because it was renovated by a very famous architect, if I can find. Let's see. I can't seem to find it. Anyway, I did the same thing that I showed you before. I offset the building to show a plain building in the background. Okay. That's right down by Ground Zero, very close. Okay. All right. I don't think you can get this picture of the City Hall because I think there's a flagpole right in the center now. And then that might be a good picture of the flagpole, but it's not, it wouldn't be the same. Okay. All right. This one I took standing in the cemetery of Trinity Church. A very long telephoto lens. I hardly use telephoto lenses. Okay. Now the building on the left, that's gone. They tore that down. Incredible stonework there. This is still standing. Crazy faces, these crazy faces, you know, why? I don't know. Okay. All right. This is gone. This, somebody covered those flowers and grapes, they covered it with cement. I don't know what the point was, but okay. 70 Pine Street, okay. Okay. This is an example of cast iron architecture. All these columns were cast iron. Okay. Federal Reserve Bank. Okay. All right. Okay. Now, this is 20 Exchange Place. And you see here the heads lined up. That's on the cover of my book. Those are the heads on the cover of my book, way down there. And I think it's the 19th floor. Okay. This is still there. I just walked past that this afternoon at the door. And they put a big sign over it, some ugly sign. Okay. So here's the head on the cover. And you can see I had to really lean out over the side of the building and turn the camera. It was not this camera. It was a handheld camera. You can't hold this You have to have this on a tripod, this camera. I had a handheld camera and leaned way, way out in order to get this profile. It was late afternoon, so this lighting is very dramatic. Okay. And this one, I waited 2 years to get this. I was working for J.P. Morgan Chase, photographing the building of 60 Wall Street. And I went down, every 2 weeks I went down there to photograph steel going up. And I saw this view, but it wasn't right. I wanted dark sky, but I also wanted to have light on the World Trade Center, and that's a very rare thing. We have the sun coming out, but the sky is dark. So I waited, every 2 weeks I saw this, and I kept holding off. Finally it happened. I couldn't believe it. Finally it happened, and I took the picture. And that's it. Thank you. Any questions?
Do you have a lot of other ones that are not in the book?
No. No, I walked around all the time searching for things to photograph, but this is what I came up with. This is, I don't have any rejects, shall we say, no.
How many pictures do you take for each scene? Just curious.
Maybe 2 or 3 sheets of film. That's all. One view that I want, the view I want, and then maybe 2 or 3 exposures.
And I noticed that most of them they're all black and white.
All black and white,
Is
yeah.
that your choice, or why did you make this decision to?
Well, because I think color is very distracting. Color has its own values. I mean, it was red or green or whatever. It distracts you from the subject matter, you know.
So you're focusing on the lighting, basically. The lighting of the.
Yeah. The lighting was critical. You had I looked out my window at 93rd Street in my apartment, and when I had time, see, I didn't have time to do this all the time. I had to actually make money, you know. So when I had time, and the weather was good, the sunlight was good, and I knew I had a list of buildings I wanted to photograph, and I had opposite them. I knew what time. I wrote down what time was best to take those pictures, and I would look out my window, which faced south, and I would say, "This looks like a good day to take whatever." And I would go down there, hopefully with permission. But I mean, you did not get on these buildings without permission. You had to get help because it was private property. I was in places nobody, unless they worked there, could get to. I was very, very lucky.
In this picture, what is that building to the left that
Here?
sort of has a dome?
Oh, that's a part of Battery Park City, I believe. The World Financial.
Oh, because I was just looking at
They were making it. This is 1987.
You mentioned that with the regular camera that you would see angles.
Yes.
So how this picture of this look if you take
Well, everything would have been going into the center. I mean, if you tilt it up, you would have to tilt up. I used a very, very wide lens to get this. I was at 20 Exchange Place, maybe, I don't know, 5 blocks away, 6 blocks away, whatever it is, 8 blocks, and I had to use a very wide lens to get this because it's so tall. But the thing with this camera is these kind of cameras, it must be level. The camera must be level. You can't tilt it. As soon as you move it a fraction, that will happen. That problem will happen. So it must be level, and then you can move the lens up and down to get the building in the shot.
Is the resolution much better?
This is very good because the film is 4 by 5 inches. It's not 35 millimeters. It's big, you know.
Do you have 1 or 2 or 3 favorite images
Well, I picked the one for the cover. That's my favorite. And the one on the back of the cover is also my favorite, the horse. So.
Are these cameras still being used today?
Oh yeah, yeah. Not. I mean, most people would not use this camera. It's a little lightweight, a little loose, shall we say. They would use a metal camera, but you have to do this in order to get the film that's almost this big. But I shouldn't say people using it today because it's all digital. Few people. The whole thing's changed. Few people are using film. Hardly anybody uses a dark room anymore. So the whole thing has changed.
Did you know the horses were there first, or you developed this?
Oh yeah, yeah. I knew that.
You knew
Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I have a question. It's really interesting to me the way you talked about the shift from like lighting the interior of buildings, which is intentionally lit, and then you went outside and had to wait for the lights to do what you wanted. Sounds like in your stories. And it sounds like you're treating these as landscapes. Have you ever photographed landscapes?
Oh yeah, I've done a lot of landscapes. Yeah, but no, it is. It's well, they're cityscapes. I mean, that's.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, they're sort of opposite from the lighting interior.
Yeah. But you have to. I mean, this thing worked because the sun was making from over here. Making some shadows of definition, so that the whole thing is timing the sun, knowing exactly when this is going to happen.
Beautiful, beautiful photographs.
Thanks.
It's fascinating you can see the project as a reaction to Sixth Avenue. And yet Sixth Avenue now is sort of becoming almost, it was an icon
Yeah.
before.
Yeah.
It's sort of becoming a historical icon that's being eaten away at this project. It almost needs the same sensitive touch to record it. So you're sort of aligned with kind of postmodern reaction to Sixth Avenue, if you like.
Well, I just think, these have so many things going for them, and it's incredible. They're just incredible things, and nobody's doing this anymore. Nobody's. I mean, who's doing this anymore? Who's doing this? Who's doing the horse? And they aren't. It's just not happening. I don't know. So instead, it's just to me, it's a boring box kind of thing. Maybe some people, I'm sure some people like the boxes, but it doesn't excite me at all.
What is your next book?
I don't know. This book took a very long time, very, very years and years. Many publishers turned this book down. Many small and big publishers. One very big publisher wanted to know how the photographs weren't in color. One publisher said he liked the photographs. He didn't want to publish it, but he couldn't wait to see it published. But he didn't want to publish it, So it was only one publisher got it, and that's the one that did the book. He was the only person that really understood what I was trying to do. The rest of them it was, I guess too risky or whatever. They didn't want to do it. So. George F. Thompson.
Are there some buildings that you wanted to get in here but aren't? They were the last minute cut?
No, I didn't. Everything I did is in here. I mean, there might be some variations that aren't, but I mean, this is the only picture I have of this, for example. There's no other angle of it. There's no other version. This is it.
And because they're canyons, you really had to focus on tall
But the thing was to get, to get on the same level with all these artifacts, get on the same level with them, not look up. If something was 30 floors up, I wanted to be 30 floors up. I wanted to get up there, either get there or get on another building to photograph it. So it took a lot of finagling and fooling around, asking people, but people helped me a lot. I couldn't have done it without them.
I noticed in this photograph you have this really bold stripe, practically right smack next to
Yeah.
the center. So were you waiting for that moment when the light was perfect to really delineate that?
Well, like I said, I saw that view for at least 2 years. I saw that, and I knew it had to be taken in the morning to get this whole effect, And I was fortunate that where I was taking the picture from, I was lined up with that line. I could have been a little to the right or to the left, and it would not be the same thing, but I happened to be lined up with this line, So I was lucky. There's a lot of luck plays into it.
Has any other city captured your passion after New York?
No. This is it. This is New York,
I neglected to mention the introduction by Paul Goldberger. How did that happen? Did you discuss it with him?
Oh yeah, I approached him and very early on, and he was, he was interested, but he sort of put me off. And then years and years later, I approached him again with more pictures, and he agreed to do it. And I'm very thankful he did, because his introduction makes this whole book work. I mean, he talks about 9/11, and we were able to put this at the end of the book, and his introduction begins with that whole thing, and so it all sort of works together, and we're very fortunate. I didn't ask him to talk about 9/11. I didn't ask him to do anything, but we're very fortunate that he wrote 14 pages or whatever it is. I mean, it's incredible.
How long it was. That's
The incredible thing that he did. He didn't have to do that, so I'm very thankful that what he did and how he did it.
I was very glad to see that you not only focused on the iconic buildings and the architecture above ground, but the doorways and entrances that go to nowhere, or they still sealed up. I actually recognize one of them that I think is now the entrance to a department store that's off on 1 Wall Street. There's an Equinox gym above.
Oh, really?
So these at the top, right? You enter through that one doorway, and it looks like it's an escalator down to the furnaces. That one got reused, but I often see these doorways and I wonder, gee, why did that door there?
Yeah.
It had a purpose at one point.
Right.
Today
It's very weird.
a project in itself.
Yeah, it's a very weird thing.
Capturing doors.
And people walking by all day long, they don't pay attention to these things at all. I mean, why should they? But they're there. They're very.
Yeah, beautiful architraves and stuff.
Yeah.
Was there any buildings you were unable to photograph because of access issues, or everyone that you had wanted to, you were able to?
I think everyone I wanted to. I mean, I don't think anybody really turned me down. You see, it was before 9/11. People were helpful. People weren't scared, and they seemed to understand the importance of photographing these buildings. So they helped me, and without the help, forget it. It never would have happened. So, anything else?
probably a good time to invite people to the reception to buy a book and have general discussions standing up over here.
Fine.
And so
Thank you.
Those of you who are new to the museum, I'm Carol Willis. I cannot do 2 things at one time, unfortunately.
I don't even know how to get out of this particular one, so hopefully Bryson will be able to do it for me. So as I introduce myself, and since I turned the air off, and you'll be able to hear me, and you'll be able to hear David, we'll start to swelter after a certain amount of time. So if we all get too uncomfortable, pull out your fans. You can either hear us or you can be cool. So you have to choose one of those two things. So for those of you who are new to the museum, I'm the founder and director and curator of the museum. And what I wanted to show you, and it's just loaded up here, is a project that makes tonight a long-standing or a long ongoing project of the museum that connected to an exhibition that we did called The Rise of Wall Street that we did about 2 or so years ago. And that makes tonight a particularly rich subject for us because we have also dedicated ourselves to the pursuit of documenting Wall Street over a long period of time. Can you stretch that to the whole screen? This is the legacy of this exhibition, which you can also see on our website, that captures and this is how we'll look at it now, that captures the research that we did for The Rise of Wall Street, which attempted to, as David knows, undertake what seems to be a manageable task of taking the length of the street, less than a mile, from Broadway to South Street, and to document everything that happened at every address through every decade of history from the 1850s, when Wall Street essentially assumed its identity as the business street, where Wall Street, the name of the street, became the synonym for the financial district of New York. And in this interface, which has it's called Wall Street Time and Place, or Vertical Wall Street, we take the addresses and turn them into a little mosaic square. And then, Bryson, if you could cursor over to something like this, that.
This one?
Yeah, whatever. That tile, which is the coordinate of 14 Wall Street and the decade of the 1920s, you see load up the items. It's not perfect yet, it's in its beta, but the items that we have in our collection, or the snippets of history that we discovered in our research, like in newspapers, for example. The archive of photographs or postcards or building permits or little articles about tenants. And the idea was that we can do that for every single one of these little squares on a coordinate of time and space. This is a big project. It ends up taking a long time. And there are lots of these little mosaics that really don't have very much information in them. So, and it's the north side of the street and the south side of the street. And you see this hasn't even loaded properly, and our internet's probably too slow down here to even do that. But Bryson, can you close that and close that up there, and then show them another example, maybe to Wall Street back in the 1870s or whatever. I'm not sure how many of these actually have a lot of information in them. But it should, eventually it'll open up fast, and it will be like pulling out a drawer of miscellany. And we really conceived of this as a document-based question kind of resource for high schools and all, where you get diverse like artifacts of history, and then you have to write a story that connects those things. So we thought of it as a kind of resource to be able to do that, to take a map and King's Views or a stationary image from a letterhead, and just whatever miscellany there was, and put it in a drawer and keep it there so that when somebody opens the drawer with serendipity, they find this diverse, but not really curated, but really a miscellany of materials that filtered through our lens of trying to locate Wall Street and these individual addresses in a kind of layer that put one building on top of another through time, as one was demolished and disappeared, and another taller one, because it's the story of the skyscraper, was built on the site, and sites became assembled. Bryson, just close that for a minute. You can see that when you start in 1850 and you move up, and I think you can intuit this, I hope, that when a building changes, the image changes. And so you can tell where there are these excited moments of development just by looking at the interface, and you can see a kind of a pattern, like a graph of when historical change, where economic and especially then building fabric changes. And you can see the things that remain the same, and David well knows, from the 1846, the Custom House, Federal Hall, we call it today, is the same building through time and until today. So all this is to say that Wall Street seduces us with its history. It seems to embody so much of the history of the city, the urban history, the financial, economic history, the architectural history, the human political history, the biographies of the people who occupy those spaces. Wall Street is enormously rich.